All right, I saved the hardest for last. Where I said modernization theory is probably the dominant one in the world right now. If you go to third world countries, this is probably going to be the dominant one right now. All right, so let's talk about this. There's this person named Vandana Shiva, 2002. She says this: people are starving because the policy structures that defended rural livelihoods and access to resources and markets, hence entitlements and incomes, are being systematically dismantled by structural adjustment programs driven by World Bank and WTO rules imposing trade liberalization. As a fancy way of saying, if you do that modernization theory, that's the thing that's screwing people over. The people for the modernization theory say, this is what's going to cause economic growth. And she's saying, absolutely not. In fact, what she might say is, are you going to see a decline in absolute poverty? Probably. But you're going to see an increase in relative poverty. Essentially, capitalism or development's cure is making the patient sicker. So here's what this argument sort of rolls around with. The problem is poor countries are kept poor by rich countries. Now you say, what? That's not true. In terms of, if we're looking at the absolute poverty numbers, that's not true, right? Absolute poverty has been declining. If you look at the relative poverty numbers, it actually is true, and that's the sort of argument here. So how do you target foreign aid? If the system is the thing that is causing the problem, you got to get out of the system. So here's how you target foreign aid. Any aid should be free of all conditionality. Conditionality, again, is that idea that I will give you this money on the condition that you do this, 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 and this. And what this argument is saying is that rather than make the loaning country or the country giving the money, let me say that again. Rather than make the country that's poor dependent on the country that's wealthy, any aid should be free of all conditionality. Debt relief is another part of this, is that the debts that were accrued in the past were done fraudulently. So let me just draw this up for you a second. So let's say 20 years ago, there was this dictator. We're going to give him a dictator hat. I don't know why that's a dictator hat, but 20 years ago, there was a dictator in charge of your country. He went out and he got a bunch of loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, ton of money coming in so that they could, quote unquote, get development in their country. Great. He then took that money and put it in his own pocket in a Swiss bank account, spent it on military, things like that, and now he's gone. He's left. Okay, so he got all the money, but he put the debt on Burkina Faso, his country. So now the people of Burkina Faso have to pay the debt back, but he got all the money. And so essentially what this is saying is the debts that were accrued in the past were done so fraudulently. You gave this guy the money. These are the guys that are on the hook. So you should cancel the debts. And another argument is that it's the least that the former colonial powers should do. We might even talk about reparations for all the harms that were caused during colonialization. So that's debt relief. Essentially just cancel the debt. I will just point out that it's unlikely for the U.S. to cancel debt, and here's why. The U.S. likes to have have countries owe it debt, so that if it wants to do an anti-terrorism project or something like that, it can just say, you owe us money. We won't make you pay it back this year if you let us do this anti-terrorism thing in your country, having leverage over it. Another argument here is that local solutions for local problems. Just because modernization worked in the U.S. and Europe doesn't mean it's going to work in Burkina Faso. Let Burkina Faso people figure out Burkina Faso's solution. And otherwise, just leave the poor countries alone. The poor countries, if the system is making poor countries poor, then just leave them out of the system altogether. Let them figure this out for themselves. Or what they might say, because again, this is largely coming out of those countries, they might say, let us figure it out for ourselves. Don't hamstring us by putting us in debt. So what are the criticisms of this? The criticisms are it can appear like the world is just giving up. Like, we tried, you can't do anything, you're on your own, figure it out for yourself. And while that's exactly what this is calling for, it doesn't always sit right with us in the Western world that we're just sort of not doing anything when we could be doing something. Will the local leaders do the right thing? Like, we could ask that question from the democracy era. Like, if they're not democracies, will that leader of that country actually try to figure out local solutions to local problems or just make it worse? Is it even paternalistic to even ask that question? Is it us sort of judging them? It assumes Marxist ideas, and if Marx is wrong, it can lead to bad outcomes. I don't want to really tie it too much to Marxism, but this does have a lot of Marxism behind it. Not the Marxism of communism, but the Marxism of the critiques of capitalism. And then there's just a lack of money for states to give money to poor states. Like why should we let you off the hook for the debts? Okay, I don't know they did a great job. This would have been better in person, but what I will say is this. You've got basic outlines of sort of 4 theories. And what I want you to do for the assignment, your last assignment for this class, other than studying for the exam or getting stuff together for the exam, which we'll figure out, is which theory is the best. And what I mean by that is, I know that a couple of them sound good. Which one should be first? Which comes first? Do you modernize first and then do some of the other things? Do you develop human capital and then do some of the other things? Do you democratize the country and then do other things? Do you leave the country alone and then you can talk about those other things? So which one do you think is the best for targeting foreign aid to help poor countries not be poor anymore? And let me just, again, point out, we often talk about these things in the abstract, but I do want you to think that these are real people that we're talking about. These aren't just numbers on a piece of paper. These are actual human beings. I mean, how do we help make those lives better? That's the assignment. And then I'll see you for the final soapbox of the class, and that is it.